All right, well, let's open it up for questions. You are welcome to type in any questions in the chat box, or Pat can unmute you if you would, like to, or you can be unmuted to ask any questions over the phone.
And Kevin, we do not have any questions at this point. We'd had somebody ask about what Emma's website was, but Bill Riddle typed it in, acecoach.com.au. So we got that set up.
Okay. Well, Andy, I've got a question for you, actually.
Okay.
I've talked to a number of pros during this, unusual time, and there's a sense that there may be some moving around, I think, in different positions after all of this passes. You're such a skilled interviewer. From the standpoint of somebody who might end up going out and interviewing for different positions, with your experience, what do you recommend? Do you have any comments for folks, or as they go out there and they interview, to be memorable and effective when they're sitting on the other side being interviewed for a job?
I think what you have to be, very clear about is that some people can be overly humble, and I think in an interview, that's not the time to do that. You need to really let a hiring group know exactly what you can do for them, and if that means being, somewhat to the higher level of your confident presentation, I would do that. When I interviewed for this job that I've got now at Columbine, they asked me, what can we expect if you're our director of tennis? And I knew that I was in a competitive environment. There were a lot of good pros that were going for this job, and my comment to them was, well, you can expect what the Denver Broncos got when they drafted, when they were able to acquire John Elway, and that's how I felt. I just, I figured I would say something. And of course, a couple of people kind of went, whoa, but then I explained to them exactly why. I kind of laughed and made it out to be like, kind of a bit of a joke, but there was a lot of confidence and seriousness in me making that comment, that I was not going to come in there and just continue the status quo, that I was going to raise the profile and raise the level of activity and give them something that I felt that they had not had at that club, prior to that. And then one of the things that somebody told me I did that was, I think, accidentally the right thing to do was they said, well, what would you describe as your biggest weakness? And I thought, well, that sure sounds like a tricky situation if I'm not careful. And so my response to that was, well, I'm probably just too much of a perfectionist. I just feel like I'm a little OCD about how clean I need the courts to be. And there will be times when I come home late for dinner and my wife's mad at me because, I saw a bunch of leaves on court 7 and I felt like I needed to pick them up before I left. Well, clearly that's not really viewed by them as a weakness, but as opposed to saying something that people might say, oh, I'm really unorganized and I have a tendency to run late for lessons. You probably don't want to say that. But if you say something along the lines of what I said, that they would kind of look at each other and view that and go, well, that's kind of actually what we do want. Be careful about how they may try to trip you up, and always try to make something into a positive, to the best extent that you can. And if you can do that and remain confident, but throw in a few self-deprecating comments from time to time so that they do sense some humility on your part, talk a lot about priorities of sportsmanship and making sure that the kids understand concepts like teamwork, and that your junior programs are all designed to make sure that everybody's having fun, and the process of having fun and working well together, that we're all going to improve, and those types of things. I think all that kind of stuff goes over really well. And I would say at this point, probably if you can talk about how you could run a very safe, let's say, germ-free environment, that's probably a good time to be talking about that right now, would be my guess.
That probably is. I think those are great comments. Thanks, Andy. Emma, I've got a question for you. So, I had the opportunity to see you speak a couple of times. One was at the Tennis House conference. And, something that occurred to me is that your presentations are so full of content. They're just very, very rich and very well done. And I wondered, in terms of from the standpoint of the people actually watching your presentations or taking in your content, there's so much there. Do you encourage people to maybe take it one step at a time? It would be hard to, I think for a lot of people to just absorb all of the information that you have at one time. I mean, do you take a piecemeal approach? I mean, what do you suggest for the learner as they explore the materials that you have and they attend your presentations?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Certainly an area for development over the years. Yep, no, you're 100% on the money. That's, even in creating presentation blueprint, there is so much great content in it. But the one thing that all of this has taught me even in creating all the online content is just the 3 key messages. So, with presentation blueprint, it is really around preparation, confidence, and relationships. Every time I present, gamer zones, the one I did recently, really just that key message of independent decision making, red ball 2 zones, orange ball 3/4 zones, and green ball 6 zones. So, so many things come in threes, as we know, traffic lights, 3 little 3 bears and the 3, et cetera, et cetera. You get my gist. But I think if you're delivering anything or you're giving anything, if there's 3 key messages, then for people to take away, that's step 1. And obviously step 2 is encouraging them to not necessarily agree with anything you say, but just be super curious. And maybe they could just add 1 tool into their coaching toolkit that they want to take action on. And I think at the end of the day, that's what it's about. Just add, 1 little thing. I know I've taken, some notes, and I'm certainly in the process of writing a book. I'm deep in it. And so I really, enjoyed what David had to say. And I look forward to following up with him on, on those 1 or 2 key things. Might just be writing X number of words per day. So, I think, yes, I need to sometimes when I present pull back on how much I give, but that's my passion. Sometimes gets the better of me. But I think 3 key messages is definitely this is the take home message.
Okay, thanks, Emma. And actually, David. And I have a question for you as well. So it could be that somebody has content that they believe would be actionable or of a great deal of value to readers, but then maybe they've got content that it's just they're very creative. I mean, how do you, like, if you're thinking about getting started, how much attention do you spend on or devote to how, let's say, actionable or relevant something is to the reader versus just unleashing your creativity and just, hey, you know what, I think I want to express myself and be creative and write this. And I don't know what the reception will be. There may not be that many takeaways from it, but it's just something I want to write. I mean, how do you manage that?
Oh boy, the good news is that every single writer that's ever written anything has their own style. That it might be that I write a book that is absolutely fact 1, fact 2, fact 3 if I'm writing nonfiction. But then when it comes to the fiction side of my writing, I try to write things that are a little bit different. Maybe they're written in a similar way, but they speak to my audience and what my voice is. And I think that's important, is to find what your voice is. And sometimes in the first book, maybe the second, some people say it takes 1 million words to find what you do and what you do well. So, going back to what I said before, sometimes it just takes just unleashing, sitting down at a computer or a notebook or whatever you have and get words on pages. And sometimes that leads you to understand what kind of book it is you're writing and what kind of style you want. And that, again, that may take a little while to really hone in on what works for you and what works for your audience.
Okay, so it sounds like it's a process of discovery or self-discovery, actually.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's nothing like, I think it was Ernest Hemingway who said writing it is easy. You just sit down at a typewriter and bleed. And it's kind of like that. I think when I sit down to write now, I am 15, 16 or 17 books in. I start with outlines. So I kind of know going in where it's going to go and what the process is going to be like to get me to the end. And I see Lane asking, do I ever know when I sit down? I do now, Lane, but I did not in the beginning. In the beginning I wrote, as they call it in the indie publishing world, they call it pants free. So I was a pantser. I would go in with no outline and just start typing and let it lead me where it would. And I found out very quickly that was a very tough road to take, but some people do it day in and day out, including maybe even, I think, Stephen King and some of those giants of the industry. So, you know, sitting down to write is a process that some people like to think, you know, you've got to sit down and get your muse going, and you got to have a cup of coffee, and you got to have everything just right, and the sun is shining just right. But it really is just sit down and put your fingers on the keys and let them go. And I think that process helps you learn what it is you want to say and how it is you want to say it.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, David. And thank you, Andy and Emma. Appreciate having all the outstanding information for everybody today. And I look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thanks, Kevin. Great being on with you guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care, my Southern friends.
Hi, Emma. Thanks.